Just imagine that you step onto a tennis court and see your opponent suddenly serve underhand, do a drop shot, switch the racket to their other hand midpoint, or even start grunting. Well, they all look bizarre to you, but behind the scenes, these weird shots aren't random at all. They're actually the controversial strategies that some players adopt to shock, confuse, and even defeat some of the best players in the history of tennis. Today, we are going to analyze the bizarre tennis strategies that you will be shocked to hear. The underarm serve. Perhaps the most controversial and bizarre strategy in tennis history is the underarm serve. Instead of tossing the ball high and smashing it down with power, the player just flicks it softly underhand, often surprising the opponent completely off guard. But this isn't just a tough shot. It's a very calculated tactical weapon that exploits modern tennis positioning. But how does it work? Because in modern tennis, players stand ridiculously far behind the baseline to return big serves. Even sometimes they get 1-0-1-5 feet back to give themselves extra reaction time against 140 plus mph serves. By making an underarm serve, the server exploits this positioning. Eventually, it forces the opponent to rush forward and often miss-hit. The psychological impact of this shot is devastating because when a player serves underarm, they're essentially saying, "I don't need power to beat you." Legends like Michael Chang famously used it to defeat Ivan Lendl at the French Open in 1989. But that moment was strategic, not desperate. Chang was cramping and couldn't generate normal serve power, so he chose the underarm serve to force Lendl to make all the pace himself. More recently, Nick Kyrgios turned it into a signature weapon, using it when opponents stood particularly far back or to disrupt rhythm at key moments. On top of that, the controversy surrounding the serve reveals tennis culture tensions. Some of them call it genius, while others say it's disrespectful, but this debate becomes part of the weapon's effectiveness. The serve forces opponents to make split-second decisions about sportsmanship and strategy while trying to return a completely unknown shot. No matter how you view it, the underarm serve is one of tennis's most bizarre yet effective tricks. Serve and volley. Another bizarre tennis strategy is serve and volley. It used to be a dominant strategy, but in today's power and baseline era, it looks very bizarre when players attempt it. The idea is simple. First of all, you have to serve, rush to the net, and cut off the return before your opponent can settle into a rally. Although the modern game is dominated by baseline grinders like Djokovic and Nadal, serve and volley now feels more like a quirky throwback tactic that completely disturbs opponents' preparation. You see, modern players spend hours and hours practicing against baseline patterns. When suddenly confronted with a player charging the net, their carefully grooved response patterns become old. Some players still use it, and when they do, it often leaves the opponent in shock, unsure how to respond to this sudden old-school aggression. Moreover, the physical effort is actually greater now than in the strategy's golden era. Today's courts are slower, rackets are more powerful, and returners can hit passing shots with much precision. This means modern serve and volleyers must cover ground faster and execute volleys with greater precision than the old players. It's bizarre because it feels out of time. Then it feels like bringing a sword to a gunfight, and yet, in the right moment, it can slice through even the toughest baseline defenses. Besides the serve and volley bizarre strategy, there is another one that comes out of the blue and keeps players shocked. The Moonball madness. Well, it's the Moonball strategy. It is the technique of hitting the ball ridiculously high with loads of topspin, putting your opponent into awkward positions. On the surface, it looks bizarre, but in reality, it can be devastating for the opponents at the right time. Let's see what the Moonball does exactly. The Moonball disrupts timing, destroys rhythm, and pushes opponents way back behind the baseline. Not only that, these shots travel in extreme arcs. Most of them sometimes bounce 1.520 feet above the net, creating awkward bounces well above shoulder height. This lengthy flight time of 3 to 4 seconds completely disrupts the rhythm modern players depend on for their power games. For example, players like Sara Errani and Francesca Schiavone were masters at frustrating rivals with this tactic, while also using it to defeat better players on the court. Also, Rafael Nadal's heavy topspin forehand is a weaponized moonball, forcing Federer and many others into bizarre defensive positions. Then, the psychological impact of moonball is very destructive. You know, many of the professional players expect fast-paced, where they can redirect pace aggressively with more effort and speed. On the contrary, moonballs force them to decrease their own pace while dealing with timing disruption. This eventually creates frustration and impatience that leads to many big blunders and unforced errors. It's bizarre because it looks ugly. Fans laugh at it and commentators roll their eyes, but for the player using it, it's a silent killer that can damage the upper hand of superior athletes through clever strategic brilliance. After the Moonball madness comes a two-handed forehand show. Two-handed forehand. We have seen many tennis players using a one-handed or two-handed backhand. But imagine hitting forehands with two hands. It sounds crazy, right? Yes, it really island. Yet some players have actually built their entire careers around this strange technique. Monica Seles, one of the greatest of all time, used two hands on both sides and dominated women's tennis in the early 90s, winning 8 Grand Slams before age 20. Her success came because the two-handed approach created unique advantages for her. It has her more racket head speed through fuller body rotation, better control, and the ability to create spins and angles that traditional forehands couldn't match. More recently, players like Fabrice Santoro also played two-handed forehands to create amazing spins and angles that no traditional stroke could make. Santoro could hit shots that curved like boomerangs, appearing to head out before curving back inside the lines. Adding to that, this technique also provided a superior disguise for him because the preparations looked similar regardless of the intended direction. Moreover, while playing this shot, the defensive capabilities are extraordinary. When stretched wide, conventional players struggle with single-handed forehands, but two-handed players maintain control and can create offensive opportunities from even impossible positions. While it may look bizarre because it breaks every rule of tennis technique, the results speak for themselves. Players who master this approach get access to shot-making possibilities that conventional players cannot match. Then there is another bizarre strategy, which is the junk ball strategy to confuse your opponents on the court. The junk ball strategy. To be honest, if tennis were food, this strategy would be fast food. It would be cheap, messy, but equally satisfying. Junk balling means giving your opponent nothing consistent to work with. You can play one shot high, one shot low, one slice, one flat, then suddenly a drop shot. It is like a mess is created on the court disguised as strategy. Fabrice Santoro again was a master at this shot too. He used to mix slices, spins, and awkward shots to completely confront rhythm-based players. The strategy exploits how modern players are trained. They learn to look for patterns and rhythm to build their games, and the junk ball deliberately destroys these pattern systems. Not only that, the execution requires exceptional technical expertise and the presence of mind. Players must be comfortable hitting flat drives, heavy topspin, delicate slices, floating lobs, and precise drop shots, and all within the same rally. But still, a well-timed drop shot after 3 deep balls can be devastating. A sudden pace change can catch opponents in poor positions. The junk ball frustrates opponents because they can't settle into their rhythm. Imagine playing someone who never gives you the same ball twice, and every shot requires fresh analysis and timing. This constant mental adjustment is exhausting and leads to errors as players attempt shots they haven't properly prepared for. In short, this strategy is most effective in windy conditions or on varying surfaces. Despite looking random, successful junk ball tennis requires a clever mind and discipline to master this technique. Moving on, another bizarre tennis strategy is the drop shot. The drop shot obsession. Well, the drop shots are common, but when players start using them again and again, it becomes bizarre. The drop shot is like a psychological warfare tactic because it forces the opponent player to constantly doubt whether the ball will go deep or suddenly die near the net. Nick Kyrgios, Daniil Medvedev, and even Novak Djokovic have adopted this strategy. When combined with baseline power, it creates a disturbing and confusing dynamic where the opponent never knows what's coming. A player might hit 3 100+ mph forehands, then suddenly execute a perfect drop shot. Coupled with that, it creates positioning nightmares. Opponents standing too close become vulnerable to power, while if they are too far back, then it gives easy drop shot opportunities. That is the reason that constant mental alertness is required for potential drops during already demanding rallies. Then, the timing is crucial as drop shots are most effective when they violate expectations. Using them during pressure points, after aggressive patterns, or when opponents are mentally focused on power exchanges can be lethal. In short, it looks cheeky, sometimes disrespectful, but in reality, it's one of the smartest weapons in tennis. The strategy utilizes the power-based nature of modern tennis by introducing an entirely new set of physical and mental challenges. The grunting game. Then comes the grunting game strategy in tennis. This one is bizarre, not because of mechanics, but psychology. Some players grunt, and some others scream with every shot. Maria Sharapova, Victoria Azarenka, and Rafael Nadal are famous for their vocal screams on court, reaching volumes exceeding 100 decibels. But here's the surprise. You see, beyond breathing technique, grunting can actually disrupt the opponent's timing. Some argue it covers the sound of the ball being hit, making it harder to read spin and pace. The timing and volume variations create additional tactical complexity for the opponents during the play. Moreover, this psychological technique can confuse players on multiple levels. Loud grunting can be intimidating and annoying, potentially causing opponents to lose focus. Then, different grunt types serve different purposes. Short, sharp sounds for aggressive shots, longer sounds for defensive play, potentially covering less pace. Many times, tournament officials struggle to regulate grunting because it's difficult to distinguish between legitimate athletic expression and technical gamesmanship. But still, the controversy itself becomes part of the tactical weapon. Everyone knows it's bizarre and it's controversial, that's why it has sparked many debates over the years, but one thing's for sure, grunting has become a psychological weapon in the tennis game that can influence match outcomes at the highest levels. Besides that clever strategy comes the switching hands midpoint tactic. Switching hands midpoint. Some players, like Rafael Nadal in his prime, have been known to switch hands midpoint, like hitting a forehand with the left hand, then suddenly switching to the right. It looks ridiculous, almost like switching, but it allows players to cover wider ground without a backhand weakness. Andy Murray also switched hands midpoint many times. While playing this shot, the tactical advantages are great if executed successfully. Instead of having traditional forehand and backhand sides, expert players can hit forehands from both sides, potentially eliminating the weaker backhand that opponents typically target. Then, to play this shot, the coordination required is extraordinary. You see, players have to transfer the racket smoothly between hands while maintaining preparation and timing. Also, the decision-making process involves a second analysis of ball placement, court position, and opportunity. Then, the psychological impact of playing this shot on opponents is huge. Most develop tactics based on stronger and weaker sides, preferred shots, and predictable patterns. When all of these assumptions fail, then opponents have to learn other tactical moves in real time. While the downside of playing this technique is that it's exhausting and awkward, requiring players to essentially learn tennis twice. This also explains why only a few rare players attempt it. Still, it remains one of the most bizarre strategies ever seen on a tennis court. Then comes the serve at the body strategy, which is also as bizarre as other tactics. Serve at the body. Most serves aim for the corners, but some players adopt the unusual tactic of serving directly at the opponent's body over and over. Why do they do that? Because it halts the returner, leaving them with no comfortable swing. In this technique, the body serves to create three uncomfortable options. Step back and you lose your position, step aside and you create an awkward return, or return while the ball targets their midsection. This finishes returners' preferred patterns and positioning strategies. Then, its psychological impact extends beyond mechanical challenges. Being repeatedly targeted makes sense of an attack that's mentally difficult to handle. Players like Andy Murray mixed it in during pressure moments, understanding that body serves are most effective when they violate expectations. Moreover, its technical execution requires effective control, targeting different body parts like the waist, chest, and legs to prevent returners from settling. It's not that hard, but when done consistently, it feels bizarre and challenging. It proves that sometimes the weirdest target is right in front of you. Extreme positioning standing miles away. After that, there is another unusual and annoying strategy that you've probably seen. It is called extreme positioning, like standing miles away to return the serve. Players like Nadal or Medvedev stand absurdly far behind the baseline to return serve, sometimes almost in the stands. It looks bizarre, almost annoying, but it gives them more time to react and neutralize big servers. The core benefit of this extreme positioning is that it gives extra reaction time against huge serves and better angles for passing shots, suggesting the server needs to do something extraordinary to win points. On the flip side, this creates opposite pressure, reducing the server's reaction time and taking away the rhythm many servers depend on. The positioning battle becomes a chess match within the tennis match. Servers must adjust their tactics, placement, and pace based on return, while returners constantly judge the perfect positioning based on serving patterns. The delay and disrupt routine. Then comes the delay and disrupt tactic, which is another bizarre strategy to deliberately slow things down, as long ball bounces before serving, extended towel breaks, or strategic pauses. It breaks rhythm and frustrates the opponent, while also urging them to make errors out of impatience. This strategy exploits modern players' dependence on rhythm and routine. Most develop elaborate pre-point plans designed to optimize their mental and physical preparation. But these intentional delays disrupt these patterns, forcing opponents to maintain their readiness for long periods. Then, the tactical timing is crucial. Delays are most effective when opponents have momentum, are serving for important games, or are in their best mental states. The disruption can cause them to overthink, lose their flow, or become emotionally consumed. Although tournament officials supervise this carefully, issuing warnings for excessive delays, there's often enough complexity about the needs to allow tactical flexibility. While the crowd hates it and umpires warn against it, this strange tactic continues to appear in high-voltage matches. It's not pretty, but it's strangely effective. The spin serve carnival. Then, there is spin serve carnival, where some players develop bizarre spin serves, like kickers that bounce over an opponent's head, side spins that curve like a boomerang, or slices that skid. Goran Ivanišević and Ivo Karlovic turned these spins into nightmares for returners. The physics of extreme spin serves to create ball flights and bounces that dodge returners' expectations and preparation strategies. Then, kick serves can bounce shoulder high or higher, forcing returners to handle balls well outside their normal strike zones. Side spin serves curve dramatically in flight, then kick sideways off the court surface. Its technical side lies in the unpredictability and unfamiliarity. Most players practice returning conventional serves, but they rarely face extreme spin variations. This preparation gap becomes an advantage for many players, particularly in key moments when returners are under pressure and have less time to adapt. Moreover, this execution requires excellent racket head speed, precise contact points, and an understanding of how different spins react with different court surfaces. To master this technique, players must also manage the timing and placement to maximize the disruptive effects while maintaining enough control to avoid double fault. At the end of the day, tennis isn't just about power and precision. It is about psychology, creativity, and sometimes pure bizarre strategies. The bizarre strategies we've explored today, like underarm serves, moonballs, junk balls, grunting, drop shots, and switching hands, show that in tennis, there's no single way to win. What looks silly or strange to some can be a genius move to others, and maybe that's the beauty of the sport. It's not just about who hits harder, but who dares to think differently.